The Correcting the Narrative campaign employs a combination of storytelling and in-person and virtual events to promote acceptance of people with criminal records as not just employees, taxpayers, and neighbors, but rather employers, equal citizens, and potential family. The narrative about this demographic is largely one of fear and danger, or at best, pity and spectacle. While it is very true about the difficulties of this demographic leading to, during, and post-incarceration, the pity and especially the spectacle narrative, often pushed by well-meaning and even system-impacted people, actually causes society to connect who we are and who we can be more with our shadows and others' misperceptions about us. Correcting the narrative is for everyone always, and applies to many areas of life impacted by false narratives. But our focus at the community is on one, empowering people with records who believe the negative narrative about their potential and humanity, and two, anyone outside of the choir on this issue who feels and believes a negative narrative about us due to a lack of exposure or a lack of understanding about people with records. Our approach has changed over time from simply showing up in our blue shirts at events in more affluent, homogenous areas to now connecting with organizations and gatekeepers in these communities through screenings, interviews, and presentations. We are focusing on doing these events all over the state and country going forward as we continue to record stories and profile issues in innovative ways for our video series and our podcast. There are people with criminal records in virtually every community, quietly living and succeeding, but ashamed or scared to have those around them find out. And you can guarantee there are people who committed crimes but just weren't ever caught or convicted in these same communities. By engaging with these more stereotypically indifferent and antagonistic audiences, they become more supportive of, or at least less opposed to, reform, re-entry, and decarceration efforts. This will result in better outcomes for the estimated 70 million adults in the US with a criminal record, and their larger number of loved ones, especially underage children. Info about the mass ineffectiveness of the system is widely available, but you have to care to look for it, or listen when it is expressed. A person can read all of the best studies and articles and books that exist about reentry and reform and the stories and struggles of people that have criminal records. But one encounter, just a short encounter, with a person that has a criminal record that challenges that view can have more of an impact than anything else that they've read or heard. It's like the carpool lane right to their heart. Those we disagree with need us, and we need them to achieve a society where we invest in safety and justice more than punishment and separation. If the world were ideal, no one would have to prove their value and correct biases. However, shoulda, woulda, coulda is not a strategy for change. Tough conversations and hard realities must be embraced and accounted for in order for sustainable solutions to take place. There is almost no greater example of this than the need to reach out to those who have shown us such disregard and say, we need you to challenge your misperceptions. My son can't be safe unless your children are healthy, and vice versa. We'll never get close to how things can be until we begin to genuinely see each other, ask better questions of each other, and lean in to uncomfortable conversations and take ownership of our stories and our futures.
Frederick Douglass once made a statement. It said, it's easier to build strong children than it is to repair broken men. So at that point, reading stuff like that, it let me know, like, we have to catch them young. We can't wait till they're 16, 17, 18 and say, hey, no, we gotta get them at 5 and 6 and say, yes, you have everything you need, you capable, and build that confidence at that point. And because if we don't, it's a tough battle after that. The name of my barbershop is the Hair Code. It's symbolic of the street code. I put down the street code, and when I took barber and cosmetology in prison, street became hair. So I live by the hair code now, not the street code anymore. Off of the barbershop and beauty salon, I started a trucking business. From there, I wrote a book. From the book, I've been speaking and mentoring while I was in prison. So that just continued upon my release. The last thing I've done has been my product line of beard products for guys that's trying to grow their beards out. I get a lot of questions about mine, so now I can just give them what I use. And lastly, is the anthology called The Comeback, which will be a book of comeback stories, not just prison stories, people that have come back from all types of things in life. I think early on in my life, I thought possibilities were endless. But somewhere along the line, like I speak about confidence and believing in yourself, that kind of took a hit. So I didn't know where my life was headed, didn't know what I was capable of or not. My rock bottom was facing life in prison. Being handcuffed, hauled off to downtown Milwaukee and facing the rest of your life in prison. You know, I don't even supposed to be here according to the odds. So I went to trial and I was found guilty of a lesser included offense of reckless homicide. And I can just tell you that like a couple of weeks later after I went to trial, another guy on the same unit I was in, he went to trial. And it's this ritual that goes on when you go to trial and you being brought back from trial, people yell out of the cell, "What did you get?" And you yell out what you got. And you know, in my case, people were like banging on the doors and screaming and yelling because they were happy that I didn't get convicted of a life sentence. Well, 2 weeks later, that same guy went, and when they yelled out of the cell, "What did you get?" It was complete silence. You know, all my life, I've been one to try to help the neighborhood in the wrong way, try to look out for my friends in the wrong way, look out for family in the wrong way. So when I found myself sitting in prison, I said, man, you know what? I've been spending a lot of energy on helping the hood, helping the guys, helping family. Now I have this time to just work on me. I could put all of that energy just on me. I think I should be okay if I just focus on what I'm trying to do in my life. And I got sent to work release and I was able to get a job in a barbershop here in Milwaukee. It opened up a lot of doors for me because nobody ever had a job working in a barbershop from prison. So I was one of the first guys to do that. So that was kind of a new phenomenon and everybody was all excited about it. But I knew like, man, this gave me a financial base coming out, which a lot of guys didn't have. So when I started thinking about helping people coming home from prison, I wanted to help the mindset, but I also wanted to help the skill set. So now speaking is next. Speaking, mentoring, coaching. I'm just gonna keep pushing it, you know. We can't stop growing. I bought the house that right next door to the childhood home I grew up in. So I'm in the same community that I, went to prison in. I don't cower from being in some of the worst communities that you might think in the city of Milwaukee. You know, I'm there. I'm on our avenue. You know, I'm in 53206. I live in 53206. You know, I go on the playground and I play with the kids and give out t-shirts and tell them to stay out of trouble. And this is what it can look like if you do what you need to do in life and make good decisions and choices. I drive a nice car. You know, I have a home. You know, this is what it can look like because they don't get examples of that too much.
When something happens, I ask people, what would justice look like for you in this situation? That's coming from an empathetic space. I don't think like, oh yeah, you should do this and you do that. I don't do that. I step up and say, okay, I understand you were harmed. What would justice look like for you? Don't think about how systems work or none of that. For you and for you to be whole again, what does that look like? And sometimes people say, I don't know. I'm patient enough to allow them to come up with their own solution and support that. That's what empathy looks like in this work.
He's a public speaker, a husband, a father, a taxpayer.
You think about this.
And a college professor in the field of criminal justice.
Yeah, I am in a position where I can teach, I can do all of these things, but it always goes back to, oh, but he has a record. Or, he was convicted of something. He's a felon. It always goes back to that. But it's like, when do I get different labels?
Now I'm in a position where I'm a professor, I'm a husband, I'm a father, I'm a community member, and I just show up for people. That's pretty much my story. I'm a humble servant. I'm the co-founder of Humanize My Hoodie. Humanize My Hoodie was birthed from a Facebook post. I said, I'm teaching this semester wearing a hoodie for all my classes. And I said, I hope my threat perception of black men in hoodies goes down for my students, because a lot of them gonna be cops, a lot of them gonna be probation officers. So teaching them criminal justice, that's an abolitionist framework, because I'm formerly incarcerated. We brought academia, but we brought streets, and I just said, humanize my hoodie, hashtag. I didn't think about it. I was making a post, put my family in a picture, stacked my books up, had on a Black Lives Matter hoodie. It just resonated. People felt it. And my friend Andre, he was already into fashion stuff and doing shows and all of that. That's the best part in all of this, because the unity of me and him, it's good to see two friends from childhood put something together that the world is feeling. Like, that's amazing. We did New York Fashion Week. Our Foot Action partnership has us in over 100 stores right now. To be able to partner like that, it's like, I dreamed of stuff like that in prison. We get to move the culture, and for that, like I said, I'm grateful, because it was a time where my sister, my brother, my mom, all my family just didn't know if I was gonna make it. From Chicago, 1978, born in the war on drugs, and hit my community hard. Uncle went to prison, father got hooked on heroin. I became a soldier in the streets and got caught with a gun, got shot, probation officers all on me, choked, thrown, like shackled, been through the flames. When I came home from prison, I started studying criminal justice, and by studying the system, I realized that the system was criminal. Freedom School gave me my first job working with kids after prison. That was 2005. I went through Ella Baker training for 7 days in Tennessee. They gave me a chance. You know, they didn't look at me as a gang leader in the movement. They just said, hey, you can serve this role and you can do this, you can train folks. It was important for me to understand, like, where are my gifts? Teaching criminal justice made sense. Facilitating restorative justice in prisons, in communities in California, in Texas. You know, I traveled the country showing other people that there's another way to actually have justice. I'm creative in my ability to understand we got enough intellect, we got enough art, we got enough science within our own communities to figure it out. You don't need police. You don't need people policing other people's bodies. You need healthy people. We need to, like, acknowledge the people we drive past every day holding signs. It should be a response. Somebody should be able to interact with them and get them the services they need. So as an abolitionist, I'm just cutting out all that red tape and saying, hey, we see a problem there. Do we have 3 or 4 people that can help tend to this? What does mutual aid look like for this group of folks? So it's just really us reclaiming our power again, saying, wait a second, why did we think that it was 911 or nothing? If Harriet Tubman can free slaves and she ain't have no Snapchat, she didn't have any of this stuff, she couldn't DM nobody or none of that. If she could do that, come on, man, I know what I can do. I know what you can do. I know what everybody can do, because like they gave us a blueprint. For some reason, we got lost in our day-to-day and everyday stuff where we didn't look at the blueprints that was left from the people of the past. I'm trying to really have freedom in this world. I don't think we really know what being free is. I don't think as a people we really think about that, you know, and it's like I'm chasing freedom, and I mean freedom of my body, freedom of my expression, freedom, you know, just true freedom. And I'm still trying to figure out what that looks like for myself, but I want everybody to understand what liberation and freedom feels like. I believe in me. Like, do you believe in you? That's what I'm trying to get people to understand. So I took some hard sacrifice and put my family in uncomfortable situations for my morals and principles. So I'm grateful to be standing on the right side of history, because when you're actually doing it, you know, you looked at as radical, but 20, 30, 40 years from now, they don't look at you as radical and you like appreciate it. They didn't respect Muhammad Ali until he got way older. But while I'm here, you know, I'm gonna fight the good fight. And if that means me being detained or harmed or oppressed, it's like I'm sacrificing for the people.
It's all started in about 1999 when I was sent to, at the time it was called Supermax Correctional Institution. At the time I had nothing in my cell but a blanket. And then when I was sent to control status, I didn't even have a blanket. So it's a legit, let's take a look in the mirror and what do you see type of moment. And I didn't recognize what I saw. And I remember I was at the peak of my misbehavior and I was strapped to a concrete slab on a little, probably 1.5-inch mat with 9 straps across my body because I was out of control, gang banging on the correctional officers, just acting like an animal. And I remember looking up, and that was my rock bottom. And I thought, how did I go from who I was as a kid with all the potential in the world to having a life sentence on administrative confinement in Supermax with really no end in sight? I was able to get in a program called the Youth Awareness Program in Oshkosh. And it's a program where every single 7th grader in the Oshkosh School District is funneled through the prison in Oshkosh. Kind of crazy concept, but I feel it's very beneficial. Just going off the DLC numbers, there's about 10,000 kids that come in the prison system. And it was great, but it was tough sometimes because it's hard to get through to teenagers. The program would be over, you walking back to the cell hall, and you think, man, I did not get through to that kid. And I can't speak for everybody else, but I can speak for everybody else, and you beat yourself up. It's like, man, what could I have done to get through to the former me? In 2007, the Milwaukee Journal did an article on me when I was inside and detailed the gang prevention work that I was doing behind bars. And so one day I'm coming back from work and back to my living dorm, and my name was checked on the mail list, which we all enjoy. We all love for our name to be checked for mail. And when I grabbed the letter, I saw that it was, the return label had my victim's last name on it. And time kind of stopped for me at that moment. I wanted the letter to berate me, to tell me that I was a piece of crap, that they hoped that I rot in prison and never see the light of day. And the letter couldn't have been further from a berating or a disrespectful tone. The letter was, thank you for what you're doing in our son's name. How can we help you? I still have those letters. They humbled me in ways that I can't really put into words, because here's this man who was writing his son's killer and saying, not only do I forgive you, but how can I help you do what you're doing better?
Adam Purcell served 23 years after a murder conviction when he was 15.
We're not trying to make everything better in one day. We can show them that the people that are, in their minds, used to putting them in prison are the very first people extending a hand when they get out saying, we need you to succeed. It's a game changer mentally, internally.
People who come out, sometimes they're in a position where they don't believe that hope is out there. And in truth, I mean, there's people that work in law enforcement that look around the communities that they're policing, and they don't see hope either.
But this room was filled with hope. It's their hope to build trust, community, and a better future.
We need to do something different. We can't incarcerate ourselves out of the problem. You look at any of the number of police-related shootings over the last couple of years, almost all of these people, not all of them, but a big majority of the people have criminal records. And so by default, they've been to prison and gotten out, and reentry has failed. And if these are the people that are having these bad interactions with law enforcement, now we see our two sides. We see the police, and we see returning citizen. Do we just keep complaining and saying, you're doing your job terrible, do it better? Or do we bring both sides together and humanize one another? And so that's what we do. We humanize the badge and we humanize the tattoo. And we've had guys ask, like, why did you shoot my brother? Or why did you kill my cousin? I hate you guys. And that's what we want to do. We want people to be honest. But the goal is to create one positive interaction between someone who's gone to prison and someone who has sent that person to prison. Because you can't have a second positive interaction if you don't have a first. The results are amazing. I mean, some of the transformations you see, words can't describe. The central door is a concept I've been working on for about the past year. It was really shocking to me that when I got out, I thought there would be this very organized reentry process in Milwaukee. And Milwaukee does have a lot of resources, but it's very siloed. And so my idea was, what if we created a central door, and it's an acronym for Department of Organized Reentry, where we bring every single reentry resource Milwaukee has to offer, put it under one physical roof. That way, when each inmate is released from state, county, or federal incarceration, or they've been sentenced to probation and don't go to prison, they still have access to the reentry resources that are needed. Because if they don't get them, obviously the next logical step is commit another crime and go to prison. I'm very slow to anger, but it is frustrating that literally 9 offices can save lives. And I get, things cost money, but it's really easy to look at it this way. Your society, that law-abiding citizen, they're gonna pay. Are you gonna pay monetarily on the front end, or are you gonna pay monetarily and in the creation of victims on the back end? And I refuse to fail, so at some point I'll make it happen. I don't know how, but I'll put my faith in God and the rest of us in Milwaukee that feel that this is definitely needed. And at the end of the day, I feel people are inherently good and wanna make this world a better place, and this is one way to do it.
Like when I sold drugs that day to that girl, she went and sold them to someone else. I didn't picture the ripple effect. I didn't think like, okay, he might die and I might be charged for that. So just as there's a negative ripple effect, there's a positive ripple effect too. And I want to contribute to that because my whole life I've contributed to negative ripples, and I want to do something different for people. I was released on December 3rd, 2019, and when I first got out of prison, I was trying to figure out how to best impact the people that I love and care for that are still incarcerated or that may be incarcerated in the future. And I think politically we have no voice, ex-incarcerated individuals, and I was trying to figure out where I would fit in all of that, and I came across Tim. So I reached out to him simply trying to figure out, okay, what was your advice for someone just starting out? What have you learned while you're in politics? What is the fastest, most efficient way to get into this field? The first time we set up the interview, everything's on Zoom, right? I had no idea that my camera was off.
No,
and then
so she told me. No, listen, so I turned my camera off because if someone else's camera isn't on, that's full range. I don't have to have my camera on, okay? And then halfway through, she's like, "Can you turn your camera on?" And so I do it, and then she's grilling me, and so then I'm like, "What is this? Is this an interrogation? What's going on here?"
I had no idea my camera was off, and I did turn it on towards the end, and it was.
And then what happened then?
He had this look on his face. It was so cute. It was I turned it on and it was his face lit up oh, hi. But I didn't know that he had a record, so it was kind of weird when I met him.
She didn't expect the person she was meeting with about this issue to have 4 felonies and have gone through a bunch of the stuff that she was going through at that moment. Overall, on probation holds and time in county jail, I probably gave up 4 years of my life between the years of 18 and 28, and I still had substance abuse problems when I got out, so I was doing 8 years on probation. By that time, I'm at UW-Madison. I'm in my 3rd year, and I still hadn't gave up pills. I still did Adderall daily, and I still drank heavily, and it all accumulated with I came home for summer break and I got into a car accident a block away from my parents' house and broke my neck. I was drinking. I don't remember it. I woke up in a hospital bed with my mom and my dad on each side of me, handcuffs on, and that was the moment that changed everything for me because for the first time, they weren't mad. But this time, they put me in inpatient treatment. And so at 29 years old, after having 14 years of consistent drug and alcohol abuse, was the first time somebody decided to put me into an inpatient treatment. And I did that, and then went into sober living, and then graduated, and here I am today.
I said that I moved when I was 5 from South America, and when you're that little, the only things that you remember aren't necessarily great things. And I have a handful of memories from South America, and they would haunt my dreams. And I didn't have a family, essentially, so I created my own. And they just happened to be older people that sold drugs. When I was 17, my boyfriend had issues with a rival gang, and I ended up at a party, and I was pregnant, and I smoked a blunt, and it was laced, and I was raped, and I lost my baby, and I had to have major surgery afterwards, and I was put on Percocet. And at 17, the Percocet made me not only feel the physical pain that went away, the emotional pain went away too. And I started selling drugs to support my own habit. Before I sold drugs for nice clothes and shoes and stuff like that, but now I was selling drugs literally for my own sanity. And I ended up catching another case, and they gave me my 1 ATR, and I went to a treatment program. And this is why it's really important that we don't view people as numbers and we view them as individuals, because when I went to this program, they outsourced me to a sexual abuse counselor, and I told them I wasn't ready. I had only been sober for about 60 days because I had done some jail time waiting to get into the treatment program. And chemically, I had progressed from heroin to methamphetamine at this point. Chemically, my brain was not ready to discuss these things. I was on like 12 different medications. They were trying to control my night terrors, control all these other things. And I told them I wasn't ready. I told them multiple times, and they're like, well, you only have 90 days at this treatment program. So you're gonna do what we need you to do in the time that we need you to do it, or you're going to go to prison. I went to 2 meetings like they asked me to, and I ran after that. And I overdosed 3 times while I was on the run, and every time someone was with me that happened to have Narcan, and they saved me, and every time I hated them for it. I ended up getting in trouble. I sold drugs to someone who sold drugs to someone else. He overdosed. Thankfully, he didn't die. But they sentenced me to 9 years in prison and 4 years extended supervision. And while I was in prison, I learned that you don't have to be bound by the demons from your past. Like, it gave me enough time to find God and to be alone with myself long enough for me to understand myself. And when I started to understand myself, I started to not hate myself. I never felt like I had any self-worth. After the rape, I felt like I was damaged goods, and society reaffirmed that by numbering me and throwing me in a box, right? But my relationship with God taught me that my worth isn't found in the world or other people's opinions of me, right? So I don't know how people do it without God, and I applaud those that can. Being numbered just adds to that, why even try? And I think it fuels that cycle. So the goal is to build personal relationships so people understand that you are more than the number and the expectations and the failures of your past. Right now, I'm doing what I can to raise awareness, trying to close down a prison. That's one of Smart Justice's main campaigns right now. We want to invest in other areas, in treatment and things like that, rather than just incarcerate people, throw them away, don't give them the treatment that they need, and then expect them to come out and live a better life.
Yeah, I have twins. We have twins now that are 5, Jeremiah and Harmony. They changed everything for me. I never wanted kids. I didn't. And when I got out, it was professional driven. Period. That's what got me through. That's what kept me off drugs. Is I have this goal. This is the goal that is going to get me to where. The only way I'm going to stay off drugs is if I continue to follow this professional goal. And that took me to Madison, took me to DC, and then these kids came along. I was looking at life as a professional. Like, I want to be a part of that one big bill. The New Deal, something like that, something that's going to change everybody's lives. And when the kids came into my life, they made everything more personal, as in, like, maybe my destiny in life is not to be a part of that big bill, but it's just to change the lives of these 3 people, these 4 people, you know what I mean? So it took it down to a personal level.
Him and the kids, they've really shown me this whole other aspect to life. For so long, everything was about money. Even when I was selling drugs, it was just about money, and there wasn't love. I didn't feel a sense of fulfillment. And now, like, I have the career path in front of me, and I didn't even realize at the time that I was still missing that. Like, I had healed in many areas, but there was this one area of being able to open up yourself to being loved, and I had shut that down for so long as just a defense mechanism. And now I'm starting to trust again, and I'm starting to see that, just like he said, like, yeah, there is this big picture goal, and I would love to unlock the vote. That's been my thing. I believe that people on probation, if you're working, you're paying taxes, you deserve the right to vote. And that's been my big push, and that's still the big push. But now I realize that there's other dimensions to life too that are just as beautiful and just as meaningful, if not more.
I come from a place where you have to do things to survive. Like, so you might not understand what that's like, but once you take away fighting for your survival and fighting just not knowing when you're gonna eat, once you get rid of all of those things, once you get down to the person, we are the same. We the same as you, like we're the same. My incarceration was a surprise. I was 20 years old at the time. In the Army, I came home on leave. The second day I was at home, I was with some friends, drinking, went out, had fun. And that night, on the way home, I got into a car accident and my friend died. He was the passenger in the vehicle at that time. I was 20 years old, drunk, doing a whole list of things that I probably shouldn't have been doing. Just the straight fact that I was responsible for killing one of my best friends doesn't get no lower. There was times where I went through depression, there's times where I thought about killing myself. You don't think about killing yourself if you love yourself. You're hurt. Prison is horrible. You don't control your life in any sense. You become a shell of a person. I don't think things started to positively shift for me until I started to accept accountability. I had a choice in everything. Nothing just happened to me by chance. Once you realize that, you realize kind of how you can change things going forward, and there's a power to that. People are telling me, like, we can see the change that you create, the things that you do, the way that you move, like you create changes in other people with the way that you are. Everything that I been through, and it just got me to the point now where my first step to anything is understanding it. Like, don't assume that what you just saw is what you saw. Understand what you just saw. Ask that person. Try to get some type of understanding of what's going on before you make your next move, because you're just going off of what that site made you feel versus getting an understanding of what was actually happening. I can't have that desire from other people if I'm not that with people. I flow more than, I try to go with the flow more than anything. Let's keep moving forward, let's keep going. Let's do that with smiles on our faces and laugh, and hopefully, you know what I mean? So like, I think I'm funny as hell. I try to make people laugh all the time. I've known my wife since about the 10th grade. We didn't like each other back then. She would probably say that I used to bully her, but that's not true. She was short, little. I was a football player. I used to say, like, bully. I did kind of used to bully her a little bit, and I think like playful, in a playful way. So yeah, I'm married. I have 3 kids. My wife, Crystal, she's, what is she? Everything. She's everything. My oldest daughter, Brooklyn, 5, is after everybody's heart, I believe. Like, there isn't a person she meets that she speaks to everyone she sees. She's just a happy, free-spirited little girl. Kiki is almost the exact opposite of Brooklyn. She's 2. Like, she got it figured out already. I almost feel like Kiki'd have been here before. And then Zaire, my niece, she's 16. She's a teenager. So great, smart, brilliant, beautiful young lady. But yeah, she's a teenager. That's pretty much the spirit of my house and myself as well. Like, I try to keep that. As long as I'm not hurting anyone or doing anything, I should be able to enjoy myself, and that's what I do.
I'm Dr. Zaria Davis, Senior Consultant with New Direction Coaching and Consulting. I was incarcerated in 2016 and released in 2017. Since my release in 2017, I feel like I've achieved some amazing things. I've served not only as an executive director for a nonprofit organization, but I've had the opportunity to launch my own business supporting nonprofit organizations, a lot of them working with folks within the criminal legal space. And then another aspect of that is I'm currently in seminary, finishing up my master's in divinity, and really excited about my next steps with that. Being incarcerated really allowed me an opportunity to dig into who I am as a person and what my passion and what my call is in this life. I think that the experiences that I had inside allowed me to see a lot of the injustices that occurred within the system that I wasn't really knowledgeable of prior to. In my former life, I was a mental health clinician and did a lot of work in that space. And in my incarceration, I saw how prevalent mental health was. I looked at the opportunities that people had in transitioning home and just some of the challenges that people had. And I was able to take those lessons that I learned while being inside from the women that I engaged with on a daily basis and really apply that into my life moving forward. When I think about correcting a narrative, I think about how people are leaders. A lot of the people inside of our facilities and the people that are coming home are leaders. And they don't always see who they are as people because of how society has defined them. And so how this shows up in my everyday is I believe in developing people who have been impacted by the system as leaders and really opening up an opportunity for them to have a voice in things that they're passionate about, as well as just being able to know that their voice matters. For me, narrative work is so important because if we don't tell our stories, no one will ever actually know like who we are, what we've been through, and we'll constantly be dealing with the stigma that's associated with being incarcerated. For me, personally, sharing my story, I think that it may give people hope, people who have not necessarily been comfortable sharing their story or being out with their lived experience, being able to see someone who is, I hope that it can encourage or inspire or give someone hope. For someone who may be feeling down because of their situation or feeling hopeless because of the various collateral consequences that exist with having a record, I'm hoping that this will just give them a glimmer of light and hope to just be able to know that there is a life beyond this, and that if they're willing to take that step to really share their story and to be vulnerable, that there can be changes. So one of the things that I learned in my journey was that reentry does not start a few weeks or a few months before you leave. It is so important that you begin your reentry journey now. I was fortunate that I had a pretrial officer who really spoke that into me from the beginning. So I went into prison knowing like things are gonna be different in my life, right? Certain opportunities are not gonna necessarily be available when I get home, but what I do inside, and then as my transition home started to occur, what I did in those spaces, it really mattered. And so I just want to encourage people, if you have opportunities to do programming, classes, things that, for you that can improve who you are, right? Just taking that time to really reflect and think about where do you want to be when you get home. The majority of us are coming home, and for those of us who aren't coming home, it's still an opportunity for you to have an impact on the people inside. I just want to be encouraging to let people know that there is life after incarceration, and there are opportunities, and there are people out here like myself that are cheering you on and here to support. I just think it's important for people to understand people who have been impacted by the criminal legal system are people. They're your neighbors, they're your kids' soccer friends, parents, and all these other things that we oftentimes don't think about. And so, I just want to encourage the people that are watching, if it's people that are inside or if it's people on the outside, to just take the time to get to know people as the human beings that they are.
My name is David Carlson. I am the founder, co-owner of CC We Adapt. I am also the co-founder, co-owner of Next Generation Properties, and I am a 2L at Mitchell Hamlin School of Law in St. Paul, Minnesota. I was, as an adult, I was incarcerated in 2010. It was January 2010. I failed the Veterans Court and I got sentenced to 3 years in, 12 years out. That was in beginning of 2012. Got earned release program, got out after about 2.5 years. I was out for 3 months and got reincarcerated again. And that time was for either 15 or 16 months. My final release was December 2015. I had a very strict routine that I stuck with. I was in Dodge Correctional for my classification. I read a Men's Health on CrossFit. I did that workout, and that became kind of the template that I started doing my workouts. I work out every single day, and most days I'd do 2 times a day. I'd make my bed early in the morning. I never wanted the COs to see me sleeping or see me relaxing. I wanted them to see me working. I feel that there's a group of individuals that were like-minded in that sense, and just put forth like all the effort that we could to do the things that were accessible to us at the time during incarceration that could better us and prepare us for touching down in the free world, for when you're out, or to prepare for the large, I think, responsibility that's kind of is ours to take on. And so for everyone who is incarcerated, you have the most important knowledge and wisdom society needs right now. Our largest issues are dealing exactly with the problems that individuals who are incarcerated right now have the answers to. Back to the point, start preparing now for coming out and having a major purpose in your life. My biggest pride is my family. My wife Alicia was here. My son Knox, oldest son, he's 4 years old, and then my youngest 2-year-old is Lennox. I came from a broken home and didn't have a stable father figure around, so it is definitely it feels like a privilege to me to be able to be in the life of both of my children. Secondly, both of the businesses I founded, We Adapt, for-profit business that offers peer support and mentorship, and then also Next Generation Properties, which is also a for-profit business. And I'm in a space now where I'm able to make a lot of decisions in real time that can really positively impact a lot of the people that I care about, the people that I grew up around, the demographic that I come from. We Adapt, peer support and mentorship. There's a lot of larger organizations trying to co-opt those spaces right now, and I think it's important that we keep those spaces for us, for individuals with lived experience, and that we're also the ones informing how that work is to be done. For the housing piece, the same thing. Those areas, I think that being in law school is going to allow me to be, and then having my degree is going to allow me to be much more effective. It's going to allow our organizations to be much more quicker in, one, providing the need to individuals when they need it, but then also expanding quickly enough so we get to, we get everywhere, not just statewide, but nationally for individuals who need it before it's too late. Me and Cedric, as part of Next Generation Properties, we had a individual who was moving into one of our properties. It was a woman and her 2 kids. The conditions that they were in prior to moving into the place we were in, they were horrible conditions for a toddler and for an infant to be under. And so we decided, that night we were going to get them into the apartment. We're up in northwestern Wisconsin, so it's primarily, white populations up there, and the participant and their family were also white and from more rural community. So we stopped by a couple of places from Facebook Marketplace that we had found, picked up some furniture, stuff like that. About 10 o'clock at night, people were looking at us crazy, 2 black guys. None of these individuals probably didn't know that we were felons, but we're also felons. And that's not something I don't think I've ever heard on the media or in the news or seen anyone talking about. And I think that needs to be what the narrative is becoming, because there's a lot of us doing this type of work. I'd tell my younger self that being a man isn't measured by your ability to do harm to others. That was my upbringing. I saw the males that I looked up to, they all were incarcerated. After living a lifetime of that, I did 2 tours in Iraq prior to my adult incarceration. My life was filled with a lot of violence, and what I've realized is I think the stronger people are not people who demonstrate violence on others, but are people who have empathy and compassion for others, despite the fact that they could do harm, and they just choose not to. I can tell you from experience that helping others and serving others selflessly is actually a much more fulfilling way to live, and it is actually a much more sustainable way to live if you actually want to, live a life where you're taking care of the people you care about.
My name is Joshua Johnson, and I work for a national nonprofit called Jobs for the Future. I'm the director of the National Innovation Hub for Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Accessibility in Registered Apprenticeship. I became incarcerated in May of 1995, and I was released in December of 2004. So I've been out here going on 18 years in the next couple months. I'll be celebrating 18 years of freedom. I have an 11-year-old son that was born in 2010. He was probably one of the biggest highlights I've had. The second biggest accomplishment is my marriage that I'm in now. My wife that I married in 2018, Michelle. My wife she had 4 kids from a previous relationship. So now essentially I have 5 children. And as I look at all 5 of them, I think about, for me, the accomplishments, not only that I've made in my life, but what they've made. And then lastly, a month ago, I became a first-time grandfather. While I was in prison, obviously, 10 years of sun up and sundown, depending on whether you're in a maximum security or I was in Texas in a county jail or in a medium security than in a minimum security. One of the things that you definitely have a lot of time to do is think. And for me, I want to say that most of those days were spent thinking about what I was going to do when I got out. I read a lot. Like I will tell you, in school, I did not want to read. I didn't want to do schoolwork, but I found myself getting immersed in books and getting lost in books and finding myself understanding parts of life or what life could be about through books. I also spent a lot of time hanging out with friends that I met in there that were had same interest, that were focused on the same mentality of I don't ever want to go back to prison. Many times when people get out of prison, they're so embarrassed about being in prison that they're afraid to talk about it. And because they're afraid to talk about it, no one knows. And because no one knows, many times judgment becomes passed on them. Or what is even more detrimental is if no one knows, someone may have a connection to something that could help you to advance in your life, but they don't even know how to make that connection because they don't know that you've been to prison. And as you get out of prison, don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to lean on folks and ask for help. Find a way to hold on to that and get connected to the people you need to that can then help you and grow, be successful. I always think back to myself, as I rose through, once I was released of prison, I worked on the dock loading trucks with construction equipment. Then I became an apprentice, working on highways. Then I left, started my own company. Then I went and started to work for state government with Division of Vocational Rehabilitation. Then moved my way up to working for the Bureau of Apprenticeship Standards. And once I got into Bureau of Apprenticeship Standards, I went from an entry-level apprenticeship training representative to the section chief, which is middle management, then to the state director, which is a career executive position within state government. So the same state government that I was incarcerated, I was under Department of Corrections. I'm now a bureau director, career executive in the Department of Workforce Development. So when I think about the phrase correcting the narrative, I'm instantly drawn back to actually what the narrative is, which is men and women who go to prison, basically, and this is my narrative, what I see, men and women who go to prison will never amount to anything. And to me, that is akin to saying at any point in your life, if you make any type of mistake, basically the rest of your life is just doomed. I always think back to a story of a job that I had where a woman was she had someone she was mentoring at the job who was younger, and I had to have a conversation with the young woman. We talked for a little bit. And when she went back to her mentor told her to make sure she never leaves her purse sitting on her desk because I had been to prison before. So that's when I think about the narrative, right? I think about this fact that people think just because what you've done determines who you will be. And I take a lot of pride in the fact that, I've stood up in front of a room of 1,000 people No one in the room knew that I was a convicted felon. And I start telling my story, and then I get down and I say, my name is Joshua Johnson, otherwise known as inmate number 305178. And you can hear a pin drop in the room because I'm in there in a suit and a tie. And it's their mentality that that's not what inmates look like. That's not what people who've committed crime look like. You're not it. That's just not it. When in reality, I ask people, what does that look like? Because I know many people who've been to prison who wear suits and ties. I know people who've been to prison who wear jeans and a t-shirt. I know people who've been to prison who are very wealthy and own businesses, own big businesses. So to me, correcting the narrative is making it very well known that just because you've been to prison, just because you've made a mistake in life, does not mean the rest of your life you just have to give up on, or anyone else should give up on you. I received a full governor's pardon in July of this year, so July of 2022, in which basically erase the fact that you can search and find out that I've been a convicted felon. Seeing where I came from, a kid who decided in 1995 at 17 years old to pick up guns and rob people on the east side of Milwaukee, to becoming a person who on a national level is trying to create change and create opportunity for men and women to get access points into registered apprenticeship. More importantly, helping men and women who have transitioned out of prison understand they have value, and as well as get them engaged in registered apprenticeship, get them engaged in careers. To me, if you want to talk about a poster child for correcting the narrative, I feel like I definitely could be one of those folks on that poster talking about where I've come from and where I'm at, and more importantly, where I'm going, because the story isn't done yet. And I think that's the danger that folks have, is they feel like that the story is done, but you really have to continue to keep pushing forward because you just don't know what's out there.
Hi, my name is Ariel Garbish here in Sheboygan, Wisconsin, and I am a Wisconsin licensed real estate agent serving Southeast Wisconsin. I was incarcerated 2015 and was released May of 2016. I just always think back to when you first sent me your link, right? You're like, this is correcting the narrative. And your opening statement was, I'll never remember this day because tears started rolling down my face, and I was like, wow, this is me, right? And it said, people with criminal records have just as much potential and humanity as anyone else in the workforce, and we are here to proactively embrace you. I'm very open, I'm very honest about my past, and I love that there is something out there to embrace opportunity for people. Because it's true, people do look at backgrounds. But what we're here to do is show you a list of careers that actually you can do and make a living and support your family. And that's correcting the narrative. We're embracing you with our humanity. We're hard workers. For me, at least, there's always, I gotta prove myself, right? You gave me this opportunity. I remember sitting with my broker. And I told him, I don't look good on paper, but one thing about me, I will always show up. I showed up for a long time without making no money. And I think back to correcting the narrative. It's if we knew of the opportunities out there for us and we were connected with the resources, would you go for it? I think so, right? Oh, I'll talk about it. Okay, I get to prison. First time incarcerated like that, right? Because I always was out on bail. And I knew when I got to prison, you can't bail out. So I started talking to girls. And I was like, how do we get out of here? How do we get out of here early? We're a truth in sentencing state. We don't go in front of a parole board and say, hey, I'm fixed, let me out. No. What I did in the 12 months that I was there, I completed 13 different programs, from relapse prevention, personal development. I did a 4-month residential AODA program. I did 3 separate different parenting courses, and I just had a baby at home, never been a parent in my life, but I was like, screw it, I'm gonna sign up. Because I just thought the busier I stayed, 1, time would go faster, and 2, it would keep my mind off of this terrible thing I knew I was about to give birth and have my child taken away from me. And 3, I knew that if I wrote the judge and said that I did all that stuff in that short period of time, I believed I could be rehabilitated, and I hoped that they could feel the same, and luckily they did approve me. But it takes a long time. Madison, I ended up getting out like 20 days early, but hey, a win was a win. It is important to share my story because there's so many like mine. And it is a ray of hope. Over the past 7 years, I have heard so many stories, and they're so similar to mine. And it's just shows people that there is a way out. Your life could be completely different, and it's one day at a time, but in all reality, you're one decision away from a completely different life. I didn't have this solid belief in myself yet, right? I did not know I was gonna come out and be where I am today at all, by any means. But I don't know, there was just something like in the back of my mind that I wanted to heal. And I knew if I took I knew one little tiny step, even if it was like a 4-week program in there that I went once a week on Wednesdays for 40 minutes, I knew that would bring back something to me. And I just knew, I don't know, once I got off drugs, like I had something in me that once I got over that, I knew I was capable of so much more in this world. Because that addiction was crippling completely. And I knew there was just something. There's always been something in the back of my mind, like always something there that like, I don't know how to really explain it. Like there's always something telling me that there's more out there for you. And like, it has created a very driven individual in all aspects. I think the big part of it too is establishing your why, right? Like, why do you want to do better? Why do you want to become this person? Why? And for me, it was like, I look at my son and I was like, baby, you do not deserve that version of me. You don't deserve to go through what I went through as a kid. You don't deserve any of that. And now I look at him and I'm like, you will thrive because I created this for you. You got to establish your why no matter what shitty, terrible like circumstances you're in. You got to think of one reason why you got to keep moving forward and hang on to that for dear life. I just want to grow, not just no cap of like growth, right? I want to just grow personally, business, mother, every year. Like I just want to see growth. Like I don't have a number in my mind. Like I do for sales. Like this year I want to hit 5 million, right? I'm at 4.5 now. You know, and we got 1 month. Probably won't hit it, but that's okay. Every year, my biggest goal is just to see growth. I want to grow as a mother. I want to grow as a woman. I want to grow career-wise. And I know my possibilities are endless with that. As long as I see growth every year, I'm going to be okay.